Hi, everybody. It's Stacy Sobel from Salon today, and today I'm talking to Jeff Grissler from Minerva and from the Salon Professional Education Corporation. And Jeff's going to talk to us a little bit about what to do if you can't pay your rent in this time of the COVID-19 pandemic. And you've been working with lease negotiations for a long time with this education corporation, but not from this end, correct, Jeff?
Well, I mean, from what I do is when we look at when a franchise buys a L'Oreal and or a Redken school, and then of course at that point the next steps would be to find space and to figure out where they're going to be into what type of strip mall or a standalone building. Then the landlord prepares a lease, and it's just the initial lease that I'm involved with, and I review the lease and basically try to find any imperfections that may cause damage to, the school owner down the line. And I've never really done it from the side of looking at it from a standpoint if you can't pay your rent. The whole intent of going into business is that you're going to, be, especially in a school, because you're spending so much money to open, that, you're going to be able to pay monthly on time and get to the finish line and maybe re-up and renegotiate again. But in this case, it's quite different. And I've done a lot of homework to see how I can help people who can't afford to pay their rent, and or for the people that maybe, they're deciding on what to do, payroll, rent, lights, electric. What's the first thing that they should look at if in order to pay or not to pay. So
talk a little bit about, as a tenant, what is your normal obligation?
Okay. So when you sign a lease, most leases are 3 years, 5 years, not normal to, a 5-year term where you would look at it and re-up again. Most of the times, if you know that if you're a school or a salon that's spending a lot of money to retrofit their space, it'd be a 5-year lease with the option to go another 5 years. And that's normally what we see out there in the school industry if you don't own the building. And in this case, for salons, I would say most leases are 3 years, 5 years, with the option to re-up for 5 again. So that's, basically how the leases are set up.
So, of course, April 1st is tomorrow. So for a lot of people, that's when their rent is due. And a lot of people aren't going to have the money to pay the rent. So what are you kind of advising them to look at, considering
okay,
doing?
So let's do this. Let's for all of us that are salon owners out there, I think there's 30 states now that have closed, that have been closed. Some have just closed last week. So here it is. You have no money coming in, and for the salons that are out in California or in New York City, Connecticut area, New Jersey, where they've been shut down 2.5, 3 weeks. Here it is, April 1st, tomorrow, and what do we do? So what I suggest is for all of us who have a lease, I mean, let's say that you're in a space 3, 4, 5 years, 7 years, and you need to go find that lease, read the lease, also pull out your insurance policy and find that and read it as well. Educate yourself as much as you can in regards to what you signed and also your insurance policies. And I'm going to tell you why. In some leases, not all, there is a thing called force majeure. And everybody's like, no, it's not a martini or a French wine. Force majeure, basically, and I'm going to read this to you so people understand what it includes. And I'm not going to throw a number out, but I'm thinking that about 20% of the landlords use a force majeure clause, and it's in most standard leases for the landlords that are a little bit lazy and they get a lease and they download it from online. So a force majeure is an exclusion of rent for strikes, riots, act of God, shortages of labor, materials, war, terroristic acts, government laws, regulations and restrictions, and in some cases, pandemic, epidemic, or disease. So for some of the people out there, and for the 350 to 400,000 salons, barbershops, and spas, and medical spas, they may have a force majeure in their clause. They also may have in their insurance policy an act of God clause. And if they do, that is a tremendous benefit if they choose not to pay their rent. And I'm going to explain that in a minute. So clearly, none of this is a salon owner, barbershop owner, spa owner's fault, right? And in some cases, we would say this is it is a pandemic, so it is a force majeure and or an act of God. I think what's going to happen is, in time, Congress will pass a bill that basically says the landlords will get a reprieve from their bank in paying their mortgages, because let's face it, they're in no different situation than the salon owner. They too have mortgages on their properties. So they'll get a benefit from the government, and what forms, who knows, and that'll trickle down to the salon owner. But in the meantime, your question, should you pay or not pay your rent? So define what you mean by that. I mean, it's pretty easy, but is there anything else you want to say with that, Stacy, before I answer that?
Well, I think probably we talked about this earlier, but it's like you've got to prioritize what you do need to cover with the cash that you've got, and then keep in mind you're probably not going to be open for quite a bit longer. So trying to make that cash stretch as far as possible.
Okay, so I'm going to answer that as best I can from the knowledge that I have in doing this for so many years. Okay. Obviously, I'm not an attorney, and I'm not going to tell people not to pay their rent. But if you don't have the money, the first thing I would do is, as a salon owner, is I would look at your HGH that you get pulled out of your account every month. You may have money in there right now, and your rent may be automatically withdrawn. So I would stop that for everything that you do, so you have better eyes on what you're spending every month. I'm sure that your monthly software may be in there, electrical bill, phone, Spectrum, AT&T, that may be on automatic, pay, HGH, every month out of your account. So take a look at that and stop everything, right? Hold on to your cash. So what I would say is, after you review your lease and you review your insurance policy, and a force majeure is not on there, an act of God's not on your insurance policy, what to do? First thing you need to do is, if you're not going to pay your rent, you need to immediately write a letter to your attorney. You cannot negotiate not paying your rent via texting and or a phone call. It has to be a certified letter. You need to put it in writing, and it needs to go out. If you're not paying your rent tomorrow, you need to get this letter out tomorrow, Tuesday, Wednesday. You need to get it out this week, and it needs to be done in a specific way. Now, you need to make sure that you call it up in the heading, a date of notice. For people that are listening, please write that down, date of notice. So you're notifying them the date that you sent this, and they'll have that on the receipt, of course. But the fact that you're not paying your rent, and you have to give an explanation why, and make it as formal as possible, the name of your salon, the corporate name, the address, and so on. And why are you sending it certified? You're sending it certified so the landlord or the agency or whoever you send that to has to sign for that. And if it should ever go to court, you'll have the receipt that you sent it. So make photocopies of what you're sending if you decide not to pay your rent.
And keep the certified notification that the post office gives you.
Correct.
Now, what Jeff generously did is craft some of these letters that people could, as a template that people could use to contact. And on Salon Today, we're starting a resource portal that we're hoping will go live this afternoon. But there's a templated letter on there for salon owners, a templated letter on there for school owners, and then you sent a follow-up secondary letter in case you don't hear back from that landlord.
I think that the landlords are scratching their heads right now, and and I'm not going to say generous, but reasonable landlord is unfortunately, I mean, they're in a position as well. So a lot of strip malls and malls today are owned by hedge funds, and they're corporate people that they have to answer to a board, and they really don't care about COVID-19, nor were they prepared for it. So, I mean, don't be surprised. And what I've been hearing around the industry is, for the people that are owned by hedge funds and big corporations, they said, pay your rent and you could pay by credit card, so you could obviously pay the credit card off, so you're not using all of your cash, and they'll discount or waive the fee that they charge you for the rent on the credit card. Yeah, so that's really generous. Not really, but what I would do if you plan on not paying your rent. And I really truly believe this, that Congress is going to pass something where the landlord is going to get money. They're going to have to apply for it. And then, of course, now the CARES Act, for the salon owners and for the landowners if they have other businesses. The CARES Act is basically 2.5 times your monthly expenses. So that's the expense of your payroll and also of your rent. So people need to go out and apply for these loans, whatever the government is. The problem is all the details haven't trickled down to salon owners and for the lay people like us. And Congress is still figuring out how to do this, but the money will come. What I would do if it was me and I owned a salon, I would reach out to my landlord via phone, and then I would send him a letter or her a letter or the corporation a letter to let them know what my intentions are. The more that you connect with your landlord, and I'm sure it's not going to be an easy phone call, but the more that you connect with them, it'll just hold up in court. Now, keep in mind, okay, so you're afraid of your whole life savings is in your salon, and everything that you love and everything your personal touches in that salon, and you care so much for your employees and your customers. So you're like, okay, so where does this leave me? Will I get evicted? Well, first off, let's think about this. Majority of the states around the country are closed, and if they're not closed now, they will be. And there isn't a judge and or court officers or anybody in the courts now. Maybe if they're open, for the some that are open, they're probably running at a third of normal staffing, and you're not going to be able, a landlord is not going to be able to walk in and get eviction papers because your eviction notices start in the court system, and they're not going to be able to get those eviction notices. So there is going to be, so the salons aren't open, the landlord businesses aren't open, and the courts aren't open. So however long this is not open is going to trickle down to the courts as well. There isn't a judge and I would think today they would loathe filling out any applications for eviction presently in the time that we are in. And I don't think the court system, I think it's going to change the way landlord-tenant relationships are for the future. It's just going to be very, very different after this is all said and done. So, cash is king, and I would hold on to my cash. Again, I'm not telling people not to pay their rent. Some will be in different positions than other, but you also have to think about your home, your household. Whether you're single or you're not, and you have a family of 10 or 5 or 3, how do you pay your bills at home and what's necessary? And, the biggest expense in your salon is payroll. The second biggest expense is your rent. And I would hold on to my money and let's see how this weighs out. But please, I emphasize that a letter needs to go out to your landlord. And if Stacy, if Salon Today Mon Salon has those letters that I gave you, please get them up and get them out so people could download those and use them. Now, keep in mind, any attorney, if you go to your attorney and say, oh my God, please write the letter for me and I can't pay the rent. Well, those attorneys are going to charge you anywhere from $500 to $1,500 for that initial letter. You have them for free. Just cut and paste what I have there, tell your story, and send it out to your landlord. And they're set up for everybody. And initially, that is fine. And then once you get to the point of a legal type of strife with the landlord, then you can get your attorney involved. Why spend the money today? Money that nothing's coming in. Why bear the expense when you have the Mon Salon Today has those letters that they can use, which I think is fabulous.
Well, and as we spoke earlier, you said, use that as a starting point. And once you've got a response back from the landlord and you're trying to understand that, that's when you go to your lawyer and say, help me understand the response and how do I respond to this specific
Well, I think
response.
so. I think a solution to a landlord is you sit down with your owner. If it's if you have a partnership in your salon or it's just an individual owner or you have multiple partners, you guys need to get on the phone, Zoom together, and figure out what your monthly expenses are. And think about what type of business you have and what you do monthly, weekly, monthly, daily, right? And you can say to myself, okay, if we are closed until May 15th or June 1st, what type of reprieve are we going to ask for from the landlord? And I think a good starting point is 3 months from today until that's the end point, like June 15th. So ask for a 90-day deferment. And that 90-day deferment should be tacked on to the back end of your lease. And it's a compromise, right? You're getting 90 days from today. And you could look at that again, and let's just say, God forbid, 90 days isn't enough. Then you could always go back to the table and say, listen, we need 30 more days. But once you stipulate exactly what it is that you want, I think 90 days is fair. If you have a viable business or a business is struggling, you'll know if 90 days, that'll give you time to remarket. Maybe have, we had Sam Veer on today on a podcast, and Sam said, think about having a reopening party. And that 90 days, keep in mind, people they're going to run back to the salon after 90 days if the salon is closed. Certainly the women are going to need more than touch-ups, but are they going to come back? Are they a little reluctant to get out in the world if everybody's been shut down? So you got to plan for that. And I think telling the landlord, having facts going in makes it easier for them to say yes. Just don't go there with the Chinese menu and say, hey, we could do this or we could do that. I think that what you're going to ask for is a deferment and tying it into the back end of your lease, whether it's 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. I think that's a safe way to approach it. And I think that you could possibly get a yes from a reasonable landlord.
Well, again, Jeff, thank you so much for crafting these letters. I think they're going to be very valuable and helpful to people. And I know that as we talked about hosting those on the site, you were sharing that this isn't a problem just for small salon owners. This is people of every size. Just the bigger the salon, the bigger the lease. And there are a lot of people who are in the same situation right now.
I think that it doesn't matter, if you're a single operator salon on Main Street, you have 5 operators, you have 50 operators, you have 500 operators, everybody's in the same boat. If you have multiple salons, it's unlikely that you own all of the real estate. It's also unlikely if you're a smaller salon, you do. For the fortunate and they own the properties, they could ask their mortgage company or the bank for forgiveness on the monthly obligation, until they get through it. And most of the banks, from what I hear, most of the banks are doing that. We could only keep our fingers crossed that landlords get money from this CARES Act or from other policies that'll come down the line in the coming weeks, and also from the insurance companies. Keep in mind too, I have 2 friends, one owns a Geico insurance company and another one that owns a State Farm company. They're just independent franchises, but Geico and State Farm are waiving the insurance premiums for the month, or however it's, they're giving a little bit of a pass. So, keep in mind, I think the key is communicating with who you borrow from, whether it be a credit card company, whether your own personal mortgage, and, keep track of what you're doing and make this your job while you're sitting at home and trying to figure this out. Also, with credit cards, if you're not going to call them and not pay, you will destroy your credit. I've been in the credit industry for a long, long time. Make the minimum payment. If you buy retail through your credit cards and you have some sizable balances, just pay the minimum and take a breath and forget about that. But just don't not pay it unless you call them. And those are the things. Keep in mind, most landlords don't report to credit agencies on your rent. Now, if you get into an eviction process, that's where it's going to end up and it'll show. But your credit cards, your mortgage, and your personal stuff does. Also, if you're a new owner of a business and or you've been in business 3, 5, 10 years, there is a good possibility that you sign personally on your lease. And if you did, that could end up, if you don't pay, that the landlord has a right to let the credit agencies, TRW, TransUnion, Equifax, know that you haven't paid the rent and you're past due. So all this trickles down to your credit, and it's all about not only saving your business but saving your credit for the future. Whether you buy a car or finance a car or your home, or even maybe renting a new space. They may go back and look. So landlords do not want to have empty spaces. Amazon has made it difficult enough for landlords. Malls around the country have many spaces. So keep that in mind as well, making your decision. I don't think there's a landlord in the country right now that wants to not give you a pass deep down they probably do, but let's just try to figure this out together. Remember, cash is king. Hold on to your money. Stop those HCHs, and let's figure this out.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to include the link to the resource portal so that you can see these letters that Jeff crafted, and please use them for your initial communications, at least to your landlord, and get that communication ball rolling. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Okay, appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.